I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and originally we lived in what was then called Roseland Terrace. It's now called the Garden District of Baton Rouge. I was named after my mother and my grandmother, and I have a great niece with the same two names, Mary Olive. People call me by various names, some of which I'm not going to mention here, but I get called Ollie for the most part. And then when I got older and a bulletin board showed up in my law office with phone messages and your initials were at the top of the column for yourself, mine said Mop. And so I've been called Mop since the early 70s by most people that I know. In fact, it's in my email address. I went to St. Joseph Academy from the first grade through the 12th grade. My father was of the view that his daughters needed a Catholic, non-co-ed education, but my brothers needed to go, they started at Highland School and finished at U High. And so that was, I don't know what that was. It was like girls go here and boys go there. But anyway, I went 12 years to St. Joseph Academy, and those were some of the best years of ever. I didn't work in high school in the summers, but as soon as I got to college, I think my dad thought it was necessary for me to be off the street, so to speak. And one of my best friends in high school is, and still one of my best friends, she's Susan Thayer now, she was Susan Johnson at the time. Her dad, Perry Johnson, was a clerk of court here for 1,000 years. And so we had these jobs that we worked down at the courthouse, and I worked in the appeals section. So every record of every case that had to go to either the First Circuit or the Supreme Court, I was back there preparing the cases for their appeal. Really and truly, the most number of cases that were appealed at that time were criminal cases. And I've been reading in the paper recently about a matter. The man is coming back up. They're trying to get him paroled or something. His name is Henry Montgomery. I worked on his file. I read his entire transcript of his trial. And that's really what kind of got me started on thinking about trying cases. Because I was reading, questions and answers, and witnesses and that sort of thing. It was very interesting to me. Choosing college for me and my brothers and sister was real simple. You're going to that college that's 2 miles up the street. And so it's amusing to me today. My nieces and nephews, and they take their children all around the country to go to a school. My dad said, you're going down the street to LSU. I mean, why would you not go to LSU? The tuition was less than $300. And, it was free, basically free. And so, and by the way, LSU was a good place to go. I mean, it was not bad. It was not a pitiful school. It was very small. I think they might have only had 12,000 students at that time. My college major was accounting because I thought, well, for girls at that time, getting jobs was not particularly easy. I'm talking about 1966 when I graduated. I mean, getting a job was not going to be that easy. So 62 to 66, you had to pick something other than, I wasn't too good at home ec. And so, and by the way, I had not by this time caught a husband, and so it looked like I might have to take care of myself. So I was going to get me a job that, was going to provide some income. I have to tell you that most of the decisions that I've made in my lifetime, what most people would call a lifetime decision, have been made out of necessity. It's like, well, what are you going to do now? And so I went into accounting. I finished in accounting with a minor in economics. I graduated, and the best job offer I had was to go to work for Gulf Oil Company. And I would be sitting in a back room with my pencil and the eraser making columns of numbers. And I thought, well, that just doesn't sound too good, and I'm not going to get out of there. These girls that are talking about the glass ceiling now, it was concrete back in '66. If you wanted to get through the ceiling at that time in a man's world, you better get yourself a drill, because you're going to drill through that ceiling. So we had gone on a vacation in Florida, and we were on the way back after a week, and it was July, and my dad said, well, you gonna take that job at Gulf? And I said, you know, Dad, I think I'll just go to law school. I went to law school at the Paul M. Hebert Law Center on the LSU campus, 2 miles up the road. And again, and I lived at home all this time. We lived in the same giant house with the pool. And so I hurried up and took the LSAT, apparently passed, and combined with my grade point average, I got a letter that said, you can start in September. And I started in September, and that was the best 3.5 years of my life for my dad. And my first case, that was my case, it was one of my neighbors got bitten by a dog. And so the lady came in, and I knew her, and she said, I wanted to collect, you know, she had got bitten on her calf, bottom of her leg. And so we fooled around with the case and got the insurance, the homeowner's insurance and this and that. We settled the case for $1,500. I'll never forget it. And so I was getting $500 cash. And so that was my third of this big contingent fee. And so I get the $500. I thought that I was a Rockefeller. I mean, you have no idea how big that was to me. And this kind of supports my theory that girls couldn't get jobs. I applied to one federal judge, not in the Middle District. I don't think the Middle District even existed at the time. But I went to that interview, and he confessed to me quite openly that if I was not a girl, I would have that position. And I went, gosh, maybe next time I'll grow a beard. So anyway, I got the job in Shreveport with Judge Pike Hall, and it was really wonderful. And then Walter Monser and Pat Screen had then gone into practice. You know, my law school exam people, they'd gone into practice with O.C. Brown. O.C. Brown was running for district attorney at the time. This is 1971. And so Walter and Pat and Jerry McKernan, who was in the firm, they were all trying to get O.C. elected to be district attorney. And O.C. had already offered me this job. It was the only lawyer in Baton Rouge that offered me a job, the only one. And so I took the job, obviously. My friends were there, and O.C. was willing to have me work for him. I had already been working in the courthouse with those appeals. And when you do appeals, you got to go visit the judge that tried the case to get things and talk to their assistants and their secretaries and their minute clerks and this and that. And if you want to know somebody in the courthouse, you don't really need to know the judge. It's that staff. If you get to know the staff and you know the people in the clerk's office, you're on third base. And so when I got this job and I was working as a lawyer, all of it, mostly ladies, working in the courthouse, in the mortgage office, in the conveyance office, in the courtrooms, in the whatever. Oh, Ollie got a job. Let's help her out. And so anyway, it all worked out. And it was easy. I mean, I didn't have to learn anything except by experience. I literally had to do it myself. Now, I did learn, I'll say this with a sense of humor, the thing I learned the fastest was how to get a continuance. But the first case that got a lot of publicity that I had, I represented Senator Greg Tarver from Shreveport, who was indicted along with Edwin Edwards and 6 others in the Edwards trial that was held in the year 2000. I say that to distinguish it from the 1985 Edwards trial and the later in 2001 Edwards trial. So this is the one that involved the riverboats. And that case lasted 4 months, and we had all kind of press coverage about that. And you know, everybody but Greg Tarver and a person by the name of Ekatri Fuller from Shreveport were convicted. And so Tarver got off, and he should have never been indicted. I knew that from Jump Street. But it was an important case because it got a lot of coverage. I got a lot of coverage. There were some things that went on during the trial that got the attention of, like the Eat, Play, and Live page that we have now. There was this black cat that showed up at the courthouse, and we kind of adopted the cat. And the Judge Palazzolo, called me in one morning to his chambers, and he said, "Have you adopted a black cat outside?" And I said, "No, the cat has adopted me." And he said, "Why a black one?" I said, "I didn't pick it out." But anyway, that got covered in the newspaper too about the cat, and then Tarver got off, and as a result of that, I got a phone call from then Commissioner of Agriculture Bob Odom about some troubles that he was having with the grand jury in Baton Rouge, a state grand jury in Baton Rouge. And so I represented him. He was ultimately indicted on 21 counts. We got rid of all of them and never had a trial. So, but that was covered for 9 years, you know, and so that kind of sort of publicity establishes a name for you. Who influenced me the most for many years was Camille Gravel. I watched his career with great interest and admiration. Camille was executive counsel to several governors, and they were governors of different stripes. I mean, you know, they weren't all the same. They were mostly Democrats, because in those days, the Republican Party could have its conventions in telephone booths. So, so they were all Democrats, but they were different types of people. And Camille had some very sage advice. He told me something years ago that I've never forgotten. And it was, I called him one time and I said, "Camille, I've got these clients, they've all been subpoenaed to a federal grand jury to talk about, we want to talk about voting." And it was a lot of African American politicians in Baton Rouge and about getting votes and passing out ballots and that sort of thing. And we had, by then, we had this Republican U.S. attorney who was like, I thought he was harassing them. That's what I thought, because it just was a bad deal. But anyway, I called him and I said, "What should I do?" And he said, "Never tell a client anything other than take the Fifth Amendment if you get in front of a grand jury." I said, "Good advice." And it's easy, you know. So that's what I've done ever since then. I tried to break into politics a couple of times, and I always tell people I got lucky and came in second. I ran for judge. First time I ran was against Hawk Daniels, and I ran against him because he was a judge in the city court and he would decide cases by flipping coins. And so, anyway, I ran against him, but he had apparently fixed everybody in Baton Rouge ticket one time. And so he won that election. And then 10 years later I ran, and apparently I made the district attorney at that time very angry, because one of my opponents was his law partner or friend or something. Anyway, so they decided that they would call me down to this grand jury to testify about something I knew nothing about, for the sole purpose of having my picture show up on the front page of the paper the next day with the Governor Edwards, and Joe Delpit, and a man who was buying pardons. So that I actually, at that time, James Carville was working with us, and James was sort of running my campaign, and I called him, said, "James, stop spending money." I said, "Look at the front page of the paper. We're not getting another vote." And so that was the end of that. That was in '86. And then recently in 2012, I ran for Supreme Court, came in third, but that was a fun race. I ran so that I wouldn't have to give $30,000 in contributions to the other 6 judges running, because they all wanted $5,000. And I said I was going to save money by running myself, because it only cost $300 to get in. My biggest interest now is fishing and going to South Lafourche Parish. I built a camp in the year 2000. Actually, I moved in October of '99 into my camp, which has now become, I go there every weekend. It's a lot of fun, have a lot of great neighbors, we have a lot of good parties, a lot of socializing, we catch a lot of fish. I don't think I'm ever going to retire until I die. And the reason is, when you're single, and I've been single all of my life, I don't have, you know, a husband, children, grandchildren, and those kind of things. In my mind, my life is sort of defined by my work. And some people would say, well, that ain't too good. You know, nobody dies and says they wish they had spent more time at the office. I might say that when I die, you know, because I've spent enough time, I've spent all the time I can spend outside the office. I don't know where I'd find any more time to do anything else that I do.